Now divide fractions. Before we divide fractions, we need to be able to find the reciprocal of a fraction. So let's look at the following. Two numbers are reciprocals of each other if their product is 1. The reciprocal of the fraction a over b is b over a because a over b times b over a equals a times b over b times a, and that does equal 1. So let's practice just finding some reciprocals getting ready to divide. The reciprocal of 7 over 2 is simply invert. The denominator becomes the numerator becomes the denominator. Now the reason why is because, by the way, 7 over 2 times 2 over 7, if you multiply, that product is 1. Let's find a few more reciprocals. Let's find the reciprocal of, say, a negative number, negative 5 over 6. The reciprocal, you just invert it. So keep the negative, and it's negative 6 over 5. If you multiply these two fractions, remember a negative times a negative is a positive, and 5 over 6 times 6 over 5, that is 1. So there's a reciprocal. Let's find the reciprocal of a whole number. Say the reciprocal of 3. Now remember, 3 can be written as 3 over 1. So what is the reciprocal? 1 over 3. So the reciprocal of 3, or 3 over 1, is 1 over 3. Now that we know how to find reciprocals, let's see how we divide. To divide two fractions, multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal of the second fraction. In other words, if a, b, c, and d represent numbers, and b and c and d are not 0, then a over b divided by c over d equals a over b times the reciprocal d over c, and then that equals numerator times numerator, a times d over b times c. Now let's practice dividing fractions. So I'd like to divide these two fractions. Remember, to divide, it's the first fraction, 4 over 8, times the reciprocal of the second fraction, 16 over 3. And now, how do we multiply fractions? It is numerator times numerator over denominator times denominator. Now, I noticed that 16 has a factor of 8, so instead of writing everything as a prime factorization, I'm going to go ahead and write that as 4 times, and then 16 I'll write as 2 times 8. And then down here in the denominator, I have 8 times 3. I'm working on simplifying my result. Common factor of 8. And I know 4 and 2 have no factor of 3, so I'm fine now. 4 times 2 is 8. 1 times 3, that's 3. The quotient is then 8/3. Now let's practice a few more times. We are dividing fractions. So let's suppose we have 11y over 20, and I want to divide that by 3 11s. So I'm dividing fractions. We know how to divide. It is the first fraction times the reciprocal of the second fraction. And so I have 11y times 11 over 20 times 3. That's how we multiply fractions. Numerator times numerator over denominator times denominator. Now let's study and see if we think there will be any common factors. Notice we have 11, which is prime, again 11, and neither of these factors has a factor of 11 in it. So I know there's no simplifying that can be done. So I'm multiplying 11y times 11. 11 times 11 is 121, and I have y, over 20 times 3, which is 60. That is my quotient when I divide, and it is in simplest form. Now let's try where we're actually multiplying and dividing. Let's suppose we have 1/2 times 2/3 in parentheses, and then divided by 5/6. Since the 1/2 times 2/3, since it is in parentheses, we will multiply first, although we would anyway as we perform operations from left to right. So let's work within parentheses, and we are multiplying fractions, so it's numerator times numerator over denominator times denominator. And let's see what we have. Notice there's a common factor of 2, and that's all there will be. So I will have then 1 times 1 in the numerator over 1 times 3, or 3 in the denominator. Now that's the product. I'm dividing that by 5/6. So if you don't mind, let me go ahead and make it multiplication of the reciprocal 6 over 5. And so that is then numerator times numerator over denominator times denominator. Now, will there be any common factors? The answer is yes. 6 and 3 have a common factor of 3. So let me continue to work to the right. I'll write 6 as 2 times 3. And then down in the denominator, I have prime numbers. So common factor of 3. And then I have 1 times 2 times 1, which is 2 over 1 times 5, or 5. When this is simplified and the operations are performed, I have an answer of 2/5.